The temperature reads -22 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind doesn't blow, it cuts. Snow moves sideways across the open plains, not falling, erasing. Trees disappear, landmarks vanish, and the world shrinks to whatever exists inside the next 10 feet around you. Your fire is dying, your body is cold. And then, nature calls. Not a mild inconvenience, not a moment of awkward timing. In air, this cold, exposed skin begins to freeze in under 4 minutes. Stepping away from camp without a plan isn't just uncomfortable. It's a decision that could end your life. For most people today, this is the moment everything falls apart. But for the Native American tribes who called the Great Plains and northern forests home, tribes who survived winters where temperatures regularly plunged below -30 Fahrenheit, documented across historical climate records of the region, this moment was handled quietly, intelligently, without panic. They didn't just endure the cold. They had a system, and that system is what most of the modern world has completely forgotten. How did they do it? How did entire communities maintain hygiene, dignity, and health for months at a time, with no plumbing, no modern sanitation, and temperatures that could kill a man who made the wrong decision at the wrong moment? The answer will change how you think about survival, and it starts somewhere most people would never think to look. Stay with us, because this is where their brilliance truly begins. Before we go further, if this kind of forgotten wisdom is what you come here for, subscribe now. Every day, we uncover another chapter of survival knowledge the modern world left behind. The stakes were never small here, is what most people misunderstand about winter survival. The danger isn't only the cold, it's the chain reaction that begins the moment small things go wrong. Waste left near a water source, a stream, a snowmelt channel, a depression in the ground where ice would thaw come spring, could contaminate drinking water and spread illness through an entire camp within days. In isolated winter conditions, with no access to outside help, a single outbreak of dysentery or waterborne illness wasn't a medical problem. It was a death sentence for the group. Odor and exposed waste also attracted predators. Wolves, bears emerging from shallow winter rest, animals that a weakened, cold-stressed camp was poorly equipped to fight. And the cold itself created a third problem no one talks about. In extreme temperatures, the simple act of leaving the warmth of a shelter for too long, even 60 seconds too long, could trigger dangerous heat loss. Every trip outside had to be planned. The teepee was not just a tent, it was a sacred, ordered living space, a system of balance between fire, air, family, and spirit. Waste inside it was not tolerated, but waste handled carelessly outside it could destroy everything within. This was the problem they solved. Not with luck, not with trial and error alone, with centuries of accumulated knowledge, passed from elder to child, season to season, in the language of survival. And the most brilliant part of their solution? It wasn't where they went. It was everything they did after. The first rule: read the land before you use it. Most modern campers pick a spot based on convenience. Distance from the tent, a little privacy, maybe a tree to lean against. Native Americans picked a spot based on science. Not the science of laboratories and textbooks, the science of observation, accumulated across generations of watching how wind moves, how water flows, how cold air settles into low ground after sunset, and how a single wrong decision in camp placement could unravel everything a community had built. The designated sanitation area was never chosen randomly. It was read into the landscape. Wind direction came first. Always. The latrine area sat downwind from the teepee circle. Never upwind, never crosswind on a shifting day. This wasn't comfort. This was pathogen control. Airborne bacteria travel. Odor carries biological material. A camp positioned correctly ensured that what left the body never drifted back toward the living space, the food stores, or the fire. Elevation came second. A gentle downward slope away from camp allowed natural drainage when temperatures rose, even slightly. Flat ground held water. Low ground collected runoff. The ideal position was a subtle decline, enough that spring melt would carry waste away from camp, not through it. Distance from water sources was non-negotiable. Modern leave-no-trace guidelines recommend a minimum of 200 feet, roughly 60 meters, from any water source for human waste disposal. What researchers and outdoor educators codified into written guidelines in the late 20th century, these communities had practiced intuitively for centuries. Natural barriers completed the system. Snowdrifts, dense tree clusters, and rock outcroppings weren't just privacy screens. They were wind management tools, reducing the speed of gusts that could scatter waste or carry odor back toward camp. In open plains where tree cover was scarce, tribes identified natural depressions and used packed snow walls, built quickly and deliberately, to create the same effect. The camp's circular layout reinforced all of it. Fire at the center, smoke drawn upward and outward through the smoke flap. Prevailing wind patterns studied before a single pole was placed. The entire structure functioned as a self-regulating air system, pulling clean air inward, pushing contaminated air out. They didn't build walls against the wind. They read the wind and let it work for them. Ash, snow, and earth. Nature's sanitation system. Now you understand where they went. But here is what most survival guides, even today, still get wrong. Location is only half the answer. The other half is what happened next. And it begins with three materials that most people walk past every day without a second thought. Remove the modern world entirely. No chemicals, no lime powder, no commercial deodorizers. What remains? Three elements, each one remarkable on its own. Combined, a system of natural sanitation that left no contamination, no lasting odor, and no biological threat to the community. The first was ash. Wood ash carries a naturally high alkaline content, typically ranging between pH 9 and pH 11, depending on the wood source. This is chemically comparable to agricultural lime, a substance still used today in modern waste management and composting systems to neutralize pathogens and control odor. When warm ash from the central fire was scattered over waste, whether in an outdoor pit or an emergency indoor container, it did two things simultaneously. It raised the pH of the immediate environment to a level where many surface bacteria could not survive, and it sealed odor by forming a dry, mineral-rich layer over the surface. This wasn't folk medicine. This was applied chemistry, discovered through observation, refined through repetition, and passed down as practical knowledge long before the word alkaline existed in any language. The second was snow. Freshly fallen snow is remarkably sterile. In sub-zero temperatures, below -10 Fahrenheit, biological decomposition slows dramatically. Waste covered by compacted snow froze within minutes, locking material in place, halting odor production, and preventing any liquid runoff that could reach water sources. This was not passive. It was strategic refrigeration, using the environment's most abundant winter resource as a natural containment system. The third was earth. Dry soil, sand, or clay-rich dirt served as the final layer, absorbing residual moisture, creating a physical barrier against any surface disturbance, and completing a three-part containment process that left the ground undisturbed and uncontaminated. The sequence was consistent. Natural lining first, dried grass, pine needles, or moss to absorb moisture and prevent freezing to the ground. Use. Then snow packed firmly over the surface. Then ash, scattered evenly as the final seal. Three materials, zero waste left behind. What we call primitive, they had already perfected. When the storm decides for you, there are nights on the northern plains when the decision is made for you. Not by choice, not by preference, by the wind. A whiteout blizzard doesn't announce itself with courtesy. One moment the air is clear, the next, visibility drops to zero. Wind chill pushes apparent temperatures to -50, -60 Fahrenheit. In conditions like these, the distance between a teepee and the designated sanitation area, perhaps 40, perhaps 60 feet, becomes genuinely dangerous. Disorientation sets in faster than most people expect. People have been lost in whiteout conditions within meters of shelter. So what happened when nature called and the storm said no? They had already prepared for that too. Inside the teepee, a secondary sanitation system waited. Birch bark, harvested and shaped in warmer months, formed the primary container material. Birch bark is naturally water-resistant due to its high betulin content, a waxy organic compound that repels moisture even under sustained contact. Shaped into a vessel and lined with a layer of dry moss or compressed grass, it functioned as a sealed, lightweight container that neither cracked in the cold nor absorbed odor into its walls. Clay-lined containers served a similar purpose, heavier, but more durable across multiple uses. Animal hide bags, treated and softened through traditional methods, offered flexibility and portability that rigid containers could not. The process was deliberate and clean. After use, ash immediately. A full covering layer, tamped down firmly, sealing both odor and biological material. The container moved to the coolest corner of the teepee, near the entrance where air exchange was highest, reducing any accumulation of indoor odor. The moment weather permitted, even a brief break in the storm, contents were removed, taken to the designated outdoor area, covered with snow and earth, and sealed with a final layer of ash. Nothing lingered. Nothing was left unmanaged. Modern wilderness survival has arrived at a similar answer through a completely different path. The WAG bag, a portable waste containment system now standard equipment in high-altitude mountaineering and U.S. military field operations, operates on the same core principle: contain, seal, remove. Developed and commercialized in the late 20th century, it mirrors a solution these communities had built from available materials long before synthetic polymers existed. They solved in practice what took modern engineering decades to formalize. The tools were different, the logic was identical, and perhaps that is the most honest measure of ingenuity. Not what materials you have, but what problems you solve with the ones you find. But the tools were only part of the answer. The deeper system, the one that kept entire communities healthy across full winter seasons, wasn't made of bark or clay or ash. It was made of people. The system that ran on people. There is a question that rarely gets asked when we study ancient survival methods. Who maintained them? Tools don't use themselves. Knowledge doesn't apply itself. A perfectly positioned latrine area means nothing if no one in the community understands why it was placed there or feels any responsibility to maintain it. This is where Native American winter sanitation separated itself from mere technique. It became culture. In many plains and woodland nations, cleanliness was not a personal preference. It was a communal obligation, woven into the same belief system that governed how they hunted, how they prayed, and how they raised their children. The earth was not a resource to be used. It was a living relationship to be honored. Every action that touched the land, including the most private and unglamorous ones, carried moral weight. Waste left carelessly was not simply an inconvenience. It was understood, in many traditions, as a disruption of balance, a break in the relationship between the community and the ground beneath them. And in a worldview where that relationship was considered foundational to survival itself, such disruptions were taken seriously. When ash was scattered over a waste pit, it was not only chemistry at work, it was acknowledgement, a small act of restoration, a signal that what had been taken from the body was being returned to the earth with care, not abandoned. Modern society invented 100 ways to hide waste. They invented one way to honor it. Elders held the knowledge. They knew which direction the prevailing winter wind shifted by late January. They knew when the primary sanitation area needed to be rotated, moved to a fresh location before overuse created contamination risk. They knew the signs that something in the system had gone wrong, and they taught those signs to anyone willing to learn. Younger members carried the physical labor, ash transport, snow packing, the daily maintenance of outdoor waste areas that kept them functional and odor-controlled across weeks of continuous use. Children learned by proximity, not through formal instruction alone, but through participation, watching, carrying, observing the rhythm of a camp that treated its own waste as seriously as it treated its food and its fire. The result was a system with no single point of failure. If one family was ill, others maintained the shared areas. If weather prevented outdoor access for days, the indoor system engaged without confusion, because everyone already knew what it required. Responsibility was distributed so evenly that the system functioned whether or not any single person was present to enforce it. According to research into traditional ecological knowledge, a field that has grown substantially since the 1990s, many indigenous sanitation and land management practices have been found to align with or anticipate principles later formalized in modern environmental science. The separation of waste from water, the use of alkaline materials for pathogen control, and the rotational use of disposal sites are all principles recognized in contemporary waste management literature. These were not accidents of culture. They were the output of a system that had been tested across generations, across seasons, across conditions that would end a less disciplined community, and had survived precisely because it worked. Illness in these communities wasn't seen as random misfortune. It was read as a signal, evidence that somewhere the balance had been broken, that the system had been neglected. And so the system was never neglected, not because rules demanded it, because everyone understood what the alternative looked like. That understanding, that shared sense of why the system mattered, is something no tool, no container, and no perfectly positioned latrine could ever replace. It had to live in the people first. What the cold taught them that comfort forgot, stand in the middle of a January blizzard on the northern plains. No phone, no shelter pre-built, no system handed to you. What do you have? What you know, what you observe, and what you are willing to learn from the world around you before it becomes an emergency. That is the inheritance these communities left behind. Not in museums, not in textbooks, in the logic of their choices, in the way they read wind before they moved, in the way they treated the ground beneath them as something that deserved an answer for what they gave it. Modern survival culture spends billions on gear, filters, compression bags, freeze-dried meals engineered to the calorie. And still, according to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, American wastewater systems release an estimated 850 billion gallons of untreated or undertreated sewage annually due to system overflows and failures. 850 billion gallons. From the most technologically advanced sanitation infrastructure in human history, communities living in -30 Fahrenheit, with birch bark and ash and packed snow, left cleaner ground behind them. That is not a romanticization of the past. That is a measurement. True survival was never about how much you carry. It was about how deeply you listen. To the wind, to the slope of the ground, to the season, to the community around you that holds knowledge you haven't yet learned to ask for. The people who survived these winters didn't win against nature. They conversed with it, season after season, generation after generation. In a language made not of words but of careful, accumulated choice. Every handful of ash scattered, every latrine positioned downwind, every child who watched an elder and understood, without being told, that this moment, this small, unglamorous act of maintenance, was part of what kept everyone alive. That is civilization, not the kind built from stone and steel, the kind built from understanding. And here is what that means for you. The next time a system fails, power, water, infrastructure, whatever form it takes, the people who move calmly through that moment won't be the ones with the most gear. They'll be the ones who paid attention, who learned something real before they needed it, who understood that the wilderness is not an enemy to be defeated. It is a teacher, patient, consistent, and entirely indifferent to whether you showed up prepared. These communities showed up prepared. For centuries, if this story gave you something, a different way of seeing, a deeper respect for what human ingenuity looks like without modern convenience, then stay with us. Because tomorrow, we open another chapter, another people, another set of conditions that should have been impossible to survive, and another proof that the most powerful survival tool ever developed was never made of metal or plastic or synthetic fiber. It was made of knowledge, passed between people who cared enough to pay attention, subscribe, and be part of that conversation. The old fires are still burning. You just have to know where to look.